you're getting married in a week.
Well,
and
just 1 week.
Yeah, exactly. So you will have a new wife.
I'll have a wife.
You currently don't have a wife.
I don't. I have a fiance.
You have a fiance.
And then I'll have a wife.
Right. In 10 days, you will have a wife.
Yep.
That will be new to you.
But I'll say this is my wife. If I say new, she'll probably look at me and be like, oh, there was a previous one.
I'm going to refer to her as your new wife. It's Connor's new wife.
I like that you're really dying on this hill. I respect that about you.
You're damn right. So I'm going to get up and make a toast to Connor and his new wife.
I think that'd be great. Can we roll that in as the show open?
Fantastic.
That's a good idea. I have no problem with this. I want to make that very clear.
Can't wait.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher.
And a toast to Connor Rogers and his new wife. That'll happen tomorrow.
Thank you, lads.
Tomorrow, he drinks free. It's his last day as a single man. Let's get hammered.
That day left a long time ago,
and let's go hammered and go out after the show. Yeah, let's go get hammered and go out after the show. Let's have a quickie bachelor party.
I am really looking forward to seeing you two spend time together at a different table than this one.
Yeah, well,
will you sit next to each other? Or
I'm going to hang out with Bart Scott.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't make that plan. I'm out on
Will you tell me you set the tables up? Are we sitting next to each other?
You don't have to be next to each other. You just get to the table and decide where you're
Can I sit next to Lawrence?
And Lawrence and his wife?
Lawrence will be at your table.
Absolutely. It'll be, so, yes, me with my old wife, Jay with his old wife, Lawrence with his old wife,
and
but you with your
my
new
way
wife.
over with my new wife. Which, by the way, Kristen agreed with you on that, which really bothered me.
It's
there
an
you
easy
go.
one. You can see both sides of the grammar table.
Yes.
You really can.
Let's hear it for Chris.
She was like, well, I technically am the new wife. And I was like, you're the wife. There was never a previous wife. So good for rare W for Matthew Berry. Rare W.
He needs them. He needs them.
I'm usually not.
Take them where you can get them.
Wives are usually a fan of me. So this is that is a rare W for me.
Well, we're excited. How the wedding goes.
Any marriage advice for Connor, Matthew?
Yeah. That's a great. Well, I've actually been married twice, so I'm an expert at it. Which is people actually don't realize that because Beth and I have been married for 16 years, but I had a brief marriage very young in my life, and
it's like Belichick with the Jets.
A little bit. We were married. My ex-wife, I should say, my ex-wife and I were married for 6.5 years. So it's not like it was like some sort of Vegas whatever, but we got married way too young. My biggest piece of advice is don't get married before you're 30. How old are you?
32.
There you go.
I win.
Perfect. Bingo, bango.
Yeah.
No.
I think my two biggest pieces of advice, being genuine here for 1 second, is that communication is key. I know that's like a cliche, but that's actually true. Like when I think back to like some of the fights that Beth and I have had, it's been almost entirely because we just haven't communicated how we're feeling, or we made assumptions that we shouldn't have made. Something like that. So that's the big one. And I think the second one is, happy wife, happy life. She's right. Kristen's always right.
Yes.
Kristen's
many years of that experience
already. It does not matter. I'm a big believer in that. And here's the other thing. This is actually very important. This is a key twist on that, right? Which is like a lot of people think happy wife, happy life. I've just got to like whatever you want, honey. Whatever you want. I don't care. That's the wrong way to approach it. The right way to approach it is like when she says, hey, I want to go to Applebee's. Where do you want to go tonight? If you say, where do you want to go tonight? And she says, I want to go to Applebee's. The response is like, fine, I don't care, wherever you want to go. That's not the right response. The response is like, that's a great idea. I also wanted to go to Applebee's.
Really double down on it.
You can't say, I don't care, whatever you want. It has to be like, oh, I care about what you care about. So yes, she has to make the decision, but then you have to be enthusiastic about the decision.
You're having fun with it too.
Right. Yes, exactly. It can't be just, I don't care. It's got to be, oh, yes, I do care. You're right. And
Did you see the Dollaritas back?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you follow up with something that you did your homework.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. My advice would be just have a backup plan. If it starts to go south, just make sure there's a backup plan.
It's like Chris Carter.
Yeah.
Always, have a fall guy. Have a backup plan and a fall guy.
Just if it starts to go south, just a little Ben DiNucci off the practice squad. Right. You need to have a backup plan. Yeah, that would be my advice.
For you,
make sure Zach Wilson's not the next man up.
Yeah. But is the backup plan like a plan B for him or for Kristen?
Right.
Like
I would say they both should have backup plans. It just makes you better. Like if you go into how much better do you feel about the Jets now that you got Tyrod Taylor as your backup to Aaron Rodgers and not Zach Wilson? You need a backup plan.
I will say this. My wife was having drinks with a girlfriend of hers, and I came home a little bit early, and so I caught conversation that I don't think I was ever supposed to. My wife was like, "Oh yeah, you should always have a backup plan. You always have a plan B." I'm like, "Who's your plan B?"
Yeah, you kind of peek your head in the
window. I was like, "Who's your plan B?" And she's like, "No, honey, no, I love you. No, there's no plan B." I'm like, "No, seriously, who's your plan B?" She's like, "Don't worry about it." So there's a plan B out there somewhere for Beth when I screw it up eventually, I'm sure. So there you go. All right.
But congratulations in advance.
Thank you.
Looking forward to tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to seeing you guys and being there. We got a lot to do today. Before we get there, we're going to get to the latest Rotoworld player news. But before we do that, Matthew, we're going to continue your positional ranks that we started last week.
Yes.
We got pass catchers today, wide receivers, and tight ends. But before we do any of that, finally the NFL schedule is here.
Thank God.
Yes, our long crisis-awaited nightmare.
Yeah. You know what? But I got to give the NFL credit. Like, they're so
amazing.
Amazing. They made it a thing.
It's unbelievable.
They made it. It's unbelievable. Like, it's literally like just.
Where's the MLB schedule release day?
Right.
It doesn't happen.
Or the NBA schedule. Like, it's legitimately a thing where they built this excitement around. Like, it's literally a calendar.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They're releasing a calendar, and like we all get so excited about it. Like. I was, I'm like, I immediately checked out, okay, where are the Commanders playing? Like, is there a game I can get to?
Holiday games.
Yeah, 1,000. Holiday games. Okay, we got 2 games on Christmas.
Yeah.
And I also, obviously, the first thing I check is like, okay, what do we got on Sunday night? And I'm just like, do we have the best schedule? Yes, we have the best schedule.
Yeah,
okay,
we'll
good.
show that.
Our schedule is great this year.
Yeah, we'll
legit,
get there.
like that's, like I'm a company man, yeah, but legit great schedule.
Sunday Night Football is Sunday Night Football for a reason.
Oh, legit great schedule.
No more Zach Wilson in primetime either. We think for now.
Jets are in a lot of
Bo Nix rolled ankle away. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
So.
We'll see. But anyway, there are a lot of nuggets from the schedule that do impact fantasy. Look, it's the middle of May, right? And so I think it's going to be, just in general, before we dive into the schedule, I think there are a couple of different implications. Number one is, I think, as you get into the draft, and we'll talk a lot about this more as we get into August, it's more tiebreakers and that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things you want to look at, just in general, as we sort of get our first look at this, is you see it here on your screen. Obviously, you want to do bye weeks. We're going to talk about that. But it's also important to know teams with long stretches of home or away games as well. Some late season bad weather games as you're trying to think about the fantasy playoffs, especially if you're doing best ball drafts right now and you want to do kind of that week 16, week 17 correlations, right? Are there teams that have a lot of dome games? Is that, like, we'll talk about Detroit. And, of course, teams on a short rest. I'm sure, Jay, you can talk to me about this, but, like, does that move the line when you know that there's a team traveling on a short week that, is halfway across the country and then they've got to play a Thursday night game?
Yep, absolutely it does. Short weeks impact the line. They can be worth a point to the spread. And then things like travel. Like, people always talk about what is home field advantage. Like, a big component of it is just how much you're traveling. The human body is not supposed to play NFL games after you've been on a plane for 7 hours, even with the way these guys travel now. So, like, we're going to look at strength of schedule. The Chargers have the second easiest strength of schedule. They also fly the most miles in the NFL, so it counts that a little bit.
I was just going to say, the Chargers are by far flying the most miles in the NFL. And the other thing is, you also sort of, again, this is all nitpicky stuff, but it's true. They're going to play a very physical style of football this year under Jim Harbaugh. They're going to run the ball a ton. They're going to play very tough defense. Yeah. And so, again, you think about, you think about Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and, each touching the ball 15 times a game because they're just running the hell out of the ball. And then now they've got to get on a 7-hour flight. Like, it just, that adds up. That's more wear and tear on players' bodies that are going to be playing, very tough football.
I think the really interesting one with the high number of dome games, Jay, you always talk about quarterbacks, that their success is also based on stable conditions. Maybe Kirk Cousins falls in line with that. Jared Goff is kind of the king of that.
Yep.
That's got to be another big factor as well.
Yeah, I think, in a way, the biggest takeaway from the schedule, for me at least, it's the same one as last year, where it's just Detroit playing all these dome games. Like, end of last season, I don't think Jared Goff went outdoors once in his last 9 games last season. Now, this season, they only play 3 outdoor games all year.
It's crazy.
And that offense, like, Goff is the guy who has the biggest splits between what he does indoors and outdoors. And that's why I think that the Lions have a really high floor as a team. we're going to get into your wide receiver rankings, Matthew. I think there's a good chance Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number one wide receiver in football because he's playing in all these dome games. So I think it's very positive for Detroit.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and Sam Laporta is my number one tight end in fantasy as well. We're going to get into my rankings, not to spoil anything.
Yeah,
but
pass catcher
but my point is to your point about Goff, you're absolutely right. His home road splits are ridiculous. He just got paid in a big way. There's no concerns about job security for Jared Goff. The one bad thing about him is that, so while they only play three they only play 3 games outdoors, you can see 2 of them come in week 16 and 17, the fantasy semifinals and semi-fantasy finals in most leagues. They are at the Bears in week 16, likely cold weather, and then at week 17, probably good weather, but still on the road at San Francisco, which we expect to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. So, I love Jared Goff could be a regular season fantasy MVP, but you may want to have an option as your number 2 quarterback as you get in there.
Yep. Also, just from
but Amon-Ra, but Jahmyr Gibbs, by the way, just think about Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Just his speed on the turf. He plays only 3 road games all year long. I mean, you suddenly get even more excited about Jahmyr Gibbs, about Amon-Ra. We talk about Laporta. Could this help Jameson Williams finally break out?
That's the really intriguing one to me, because the opportunity will be there, and it feels like they could be a high-flying offense with Jameson Williams involved finally.
Yep. The thing that I look at most in terms of how the schedule is sequenced in terms of win totals and who's going to win the Super Bowl, and we're going to talk about that a bit later, but I would always look historically at when Brady was on the Patriots. I'd always look at who plays the Patriots in the final week of the season, because that's when you want to play the Patriots, because they've already clinched the AFC East by then every single year. And you want to play, I think you'd rather play Baltimore towards the end of the season than in week 1, because Lamar Jackson's going to be there week 1. He may be more likely he's hurt towards the end of the season. And so with your Jets, Connor, which we'll get into in a little bit, the fact that they play all these rookie quarterbacks really early, I think is really good for them in particular. The fact that the schedule, even though it's a tough couple of opening games for them, I believe, it gets easier pretty quickly.
Yeah, you'd rather see those guys early, right? Yeah. And the Jets, an older team at some key areas, quarterback, both tackle spots, you feel like that's when they'll be at their best too, when those guys are healthy. So
just
to
give you an example, just to your point about the Jets, right? Just look, the Jets are going to be a popular defense anyway, and week 1 they play at San Francisco, not a great matchup.
Yeah, tough matchup.
But look at that. Week 2 at Will Levis. Week 3 they get Drake May. Week 4 they get rookie Bo Nix. Week 5 it's either Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy in London, right? It's not until Josh Allen at week 6 that you're nervous. But then, by the way, at week 7 it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, and week 8 they get Drake May again. There's in the first 8 weeks, there's 2 quarterbacks that scare you.
And they were really good against Josh Allen in their home game last year, and they destroyed C.J. Stroud at MetLife last year. So you're right. The Jets' defense, the value is going to be fascinating how they're viewed.
Yeah, I mean,
how early you take them.
Especially because you get out to a hot start there with them as well, right?
Handy not playing the Dolphins either till week 14. I think they are, one of those good teams who may not have anything to play for in week 18. They may. Tyreek Hill also seems to get hurt by week 14 every single season.
Yep. Ron Armstead.
The Dolphins, by the way, and I don't know if we have the Dolphins schedule up. The Dolphins, I think, is really I think he can knock Tua a spot or 2. And just, again, we love the Dolphins offense for fantasy football. It's going to be filled with, fantasy goodness. But look at how they end the season. So you mentioned that the Jets in week 14, right? So they play the Jets. The game's in Miami, but they're playing the Jets in week 14. Week 15, they're at Houston. We expect the Texans defense to be pretty good this year and, to be improved. Week 16, they're home against the 49ers. Again, really tough 49ers defense. Week 17, they're at Cleveland. And if you're in a fantasy league that plays it up to week 18, they're at the Jets in week 18. So the last 2 games of the season, on the road, cold weather. We've seen, Tua has struggled in cold weather. So at Cleveland and at the Jets in 17 and 18. But just honestly, starting in week 14 all the way through the fantasy playoffs, they don't have one easy defense.
Think of the wind in those 2 places, Cleveland and, of course, MetLife Stadium. Those are awful places for Miami to travel to close out the season.
I'm still scarred from betting on Tua in that Kansas City playoff game and seeing him at being out. I know that was a unique game. Conditions aren't going to be like that every cold weather game, but he just couldn't do anything in there, and he's someone you'd much rather be at home.
One other little schedule quirk that I sort of noticed here, which is kind of interesting. So you talk about weeks 15, 16, and 17, right? Obviously, the fantasy playoffs in almost every league. The Raiders, which aren't a sexy team, no one's going to like the Raiders, but the Raiders play 3 consecutive dome games, week 15, 16, and 17, and so we're going to talk a little bit later about Davante Adams, but I just, whether it's Zamir White, whether it's, Adams or Jacoby Myers, or just, I don't know, I thought that was pretty interesting that during the fantasy playoffs, the Raiders have this, a really good, dome schedule, as it were, there in the fantasy playoffs. Last thing for me that I wanted to mention here is the Ravens, and I know you're concerned a little bit about the Ravens win total, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that. I like the Ravens under 11.5 wins just because, 1, they stayed relatively healthy last season. 2, just in general, if you win 13 games the year before, it's pretty hard to match that the following year just with attrition, just with a bit more bad luck. The fact that they just never, ever had to play from behind last year, they just never trailed in games. So I think that the Ravens, it's going to be a more difficult season for them just because, they were the 1 seed last year, so it's probably going to get harder.
I don't know we're going to get into it, but just look at how they start this. A lot of times, we see this. We saw this 2 years ago with the Eagles, right? The year they went to the Super Bowl. Is like they had such an easy schedule. I remember that was one of the reasons I talked up Jalen Hurts as my ride or die 2 years ago, because I was like, listen, you get on that easy schedule and you start believing in yourself. It really is a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes when you get off to a hot start or you struggle. And to look at the Ravens' first 5 games at the Chiefs, all right, home to the Raiders, okay, fine. At the Cowboys, home to the Bills, at the Bengals. Then what do they got?
Toughest game of all.
Right.
Week 6.
Then they got my Commanders in week 6, but whatever. At the Buccaneers, that's not a layup. And then they're at the Browns in week 8. If you are a Ravens fan, the only games that you feel good about in the first 8 weeks, I would argue, would be the Raiders and the Commanders.
Yep.
Again, the Buccaneers we expect to be better, but but anyway, the Buccaneers are above average, but the others are all we expect to be among the elite defenses in the NFL. And I get it, the Ravens are the Ravens, and he's Lamar Jackson, but you wouldn't mind more Raiders and Commanders type games and less, Bills, Bengals, Chiefs.
Yep. The other thing too is just they finished first in the division, so they get a first place schedule. They have to play these extra games against the Bills, the Texans, and at the Bucs. Also, random little small thing, given that we have 17 games now, it's imbalanced, so there's 8 home games for the AFC teams this year, so they have an extra road game as well. So there's just a few different things working against the Ravens.
How about some more optimistic win total bets, Jay? Before we get back to some notable schedules and by Mageddon, who are the teams you're looking at that you think that it makes sense to go over their win total?
New York Jets, Connor. 9.5 for the Jets. The over on that, I think. Just with, 1, we saw their schedule, how it's going to be easy early. I think that works well for them. This is still, we've seen Aaron Rodgers play, 4 snaps for the New York Jets. So I think that for them to build into the season playing these rookie quarterbacks, I think that will help. I think this is perhaps the most talented defense in the league on paper. And I just think the thing with Rodgers, it's not just that he's Aaron Rodgers, it's just that going from Wilson to Rodgers, from anyone resembling competence, it's just going to lift everyone up. I think the offensive line has not been as chronicled how improved that is, and I understand there are health risks with guys like Tyron Smith and AVT, but just they're going to have a better offensive line. They just have more things to throw at that.
How many games did the Jets win last year?
7.
They won 7 games, and so you're saying that they improved the offensive line, they added to the receiving core, right? They add Mike Williams, they add Malachi Corley. They don't have, last year it was Garrett Wilson, and that's it. All due respect to Alan Lazard, right? I mean, no, but seriously,
I know.
But just weeks. Mike Williams needs to be healthy, and they need to get something out of Corley and everything like that. But you feel much better about the Jets' receiving core this year. You feel much better about their offensive line. You feel better about Breece Hall at this point than you did last year because you weren't sure how healthy he was going to be. And by the way, I think more importantly that even if something happens to Rodgers, and we certainly hope he stays healthy all year long, you've got Tyrod Taylor, who's a professional NFL quarterback. Like that. Last year with Zach Wilson and a brutal offensive line and only Garrett Wilson as a receiver, you guys won 7 games. You tell me you can't win 3 more games. And again, to your point, Jay, they got a 3rd-place schedule, or a 4th-place schedule, actually, right? I mean, they've got a bad – so I love that bet. I love over the 9.5 on the Jets win total.
Yep. The other one I'll throw out there is the Detroit Lions at over 10.5, where I think that this team, I don't see any reason why they should be worse this season. This is a young group, again, playing in domes a ton, which is hugely helpful for Jared Goff. Understand it's a tough division, even though the Vikings, I think, will be a little bit worse. I think on defense, which was the weakness of the team last year, I think that's fortified. They've got these young guys like Branch, Melfonu, and Hockenson. These guys are all going to get better. They fortified the cornerback room. I think this is just now, and it's strange to say about the Detroit Lions, but this is just a very smart, well-run organization that has made good decisions in the draft. The schedule it's not easy because they did win the division, but it's not one of the hardest schedules in the league. So I think that the Lions, I think they'll get to 11 wins.
Again, I don't think you can make enough of the fact that they only have to play 3 games out of a dome. And I will say an underrated part of the Alliance, to your point about the improved defense, also just the fact that they got Ben Johnson back.
Yeah.
Like there's so much. I mean, last year it was sort of all coming together, but the fact that Ben Johnson stayed, that Jared Goff is paid, got paid, and so I think internally you sit there and you say, okay, like, hey, Jared Goff came here. He was a question mark. He performed, and they took care of him. And in a locker room, that's huge for all the players internally. And so, like, they've all bought into Dan Campbell. They've all bought into Ben Johnson. And so I believe seeing something like that also helps the entire team. I know that seems dumb, but I'm telling you that
not dumb.
Because you see there are teams that don't do that. I mean, the Commanders for years would again, don't get me started.
When you change regimes,
they
have continuity.
Continuity helps in a significant way, but more importantly, there are times where somebody gets expensive and they're like, oh, we're just going to franchise tag you, or we're going to let you go, we're going to let you walk, and so that does something internally in the locker room where you're just like, oh, if I get too expensive, like they're not going to keep me, they're going to kick me out, and like, oh no, like we took care of Jared Goff, we made him one of the. I mean, you can argue whether it was the right deal or not, but they made him, one of the top 3 highest paid people on the planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or at least within professional sports.
Yeah.
I mean, like in the NFL.
On offense as well, like I think they can get better on offense. They brought back effectively their offensive line, 80% of it. I don't think they're going to get worse there. Jameson Williams should get better. Sam Laporta will get better. Also, by the way, Jared Goff's only 29. I think Jared Goff can get better as well, and he was excellent last season. And just with him in a dome, like Jared Goff in a dome is like Dak Prescott, and then outside of a dome, he's like not Zach Wilson, but closer to that.
Yeah.
And so getting 14 games of Dak Prescott as your quarterback is pretty good. So I think that the Lions, I think they're going to be in the mix for the 1 seed. I think they're going to be a story of the season.
And more usage out of the gate for Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Like they kind of kept training wheels on him a little bit out of the gate last season, and this year it's going to be like, well, good luck stopping all of this now.
By the way, they make their NFL debut Sunday night on NBC. They play the Rams week 1. That'll be a great game.
Yep. Great playoff game.
Again, I'm a company man, but real talk for a second. Like we got Chiefs Ravens Thursday.
That's
to open the
Take
season.
a look at the Sunday night football schedule because it is phenomenal.
Look at this. This is like legit, right? So we open up Ravens at Chiefs, the AFC Championship title match. Very next night, we got Friday Night Football from Brazil.
You going? Rio?
Sure. They told me that there's going to be a live fantasy football happy hour from Brazil.
Matthew Dino?
Oh, well, listen, they love Dollaritas in Brazil too. Make no mistake about that. Packers Eagles. So Jordan Love versus Jalen Hurts. That's 2 great NFC teams. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then a playoff rematch in week 1 on Sunday night. Rams at the Lions. Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff once again facing their former teams face off there. That'll be a lot of fun. Matthew Stafford's return once again to Detroit.
If you're going to choose the worst game, it would probably be Bengals against my Giants. And you still get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in prime time there.
Right, which is must watch.
The resurgent New York Giants on their way to 6-11.
Speaking of which, did you see the Giants'
but
new
honestly,
throwbacks they released today?
Spider-Man?
Yeah. Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Dreadful.
Honestly, and from an NBC perspective, like, I don't want to speak for the executives here. They're thrilled. Joe Burrow against New York. Yeah. It's the New York market. It's the New York television
Giants
market.
Fan base is massive.
Giants fan base will be massive. Like that'll do that game, regardless of the quote competitiveness of it. That game will do a massive number.
Yeah, and if that's the quote unquote worst game on the schedule, you're doing pretty well.
No, we have a ridiculous schedule. God bless NBC. God bless the proud Peacock. God bless America.
God bless Daniel Jones.
Let's close out with some notable schedules, and then we'll show you the bye weeks because there are 2 weeks of bye-mageddon this year. But we talked about the Chiefs a lot. They kick off against the Ravens. Super Bowl rematch is week 7 after their bye. The interesting thing here, Matthew, from a fantasy perspective and a Chiefs perspective, is that 9 of their final 15 games are on the road.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, and it's kind of a mixed bag there, right? But you sit there, you look at starting in Week 11, they're at the Bills, they're at the Panthers. That's not an easy place to play. They're at the Browns in Week 15. They finish out the season at Steelers, at Broncos in Week 18.
A little bit of a soft landing there.
A little bit of a soft landing, but still it's like, the Chiefs are going to have a tougher schedule, right? Especially honestly, just down the stretch. You're not worried really about the Raiders. That's the Black Friday game. But honestly, at Bills, again, at Panthers, the Panthers have a good defense. Home to the Chargers, that's a good defense. At the Browns, that's a good defense. Home to the Texans, that's a good defense. At the Steelers, that's a good defense. As you head down the stretch, now, it's still Patrick Mahomes, it's still Andy Reid. They added Hollywood Brown. We like Xavier Worthy.
Right.
That in theory we expect a suspension for Rashee Rice, but in theory he should be back by then. We don't know how that's going to play out, but so it should be a better offense than they were last year. But yeah, that's not a that's if you want to knock the Chiefs slightly, you would love to see him have more of a even home road split down the stretch than having whatever it is, 9 of their final 15 games on the road.
I think the thing with the Chiefs too is that previously I was a big believer in the fact that their schedule doesn't really matter because it's Mahomes, and Mahomes is the most defense agnostic quarterback. No, I'm not so sure after last year. And they won the Super Bowl, which is still bizarre to me that they had seemingly a very bad year for them and they still won the Super Bowl. But the fact that don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice. Marquez Brown, is he going to be good? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be a glorified MVS? I think he's going to be better than that, but we don't know in this offense.
And he's had trouble staying healthy throughout his career.
Exactly. Kelsey is going to be on a pitch count, you would suspect. And then we'll see what else they do. But I don't think you can just pencil in the Chiefs. Previously, you could pencil them in. It's going to be a top 2, top 3 offense. It may be that again, but there's a bit more uncertainty than usual.
I mean, if repeating is really hard, 3-peating is almost impossible.
Right.
So...
Yep. At the same time.
They're the Chiefs and he's Patrick Mahomes.
Right. Yeah. Over on the NFC, the powerhouse over there, the 49ers, they open up on Monday Night Football against the Jets. They have 6 primetime games. That is the maximum allowed for teams in the NFL. 4 of the first 6 opponents have sub-8 win totals here, though, Matthew.
They do, but we expect the Jets to be better. I mean, so
that's a tough trip for the Jets. Cross country.
That is a tough trip.
Shanahan knows Saleh and Ulbricht's defense very well.
Yes.
The Jets will obviously probably finish that as 5.5-point underdogs, which is a pretty big line. All things considered.
I would think so. And then it's a pretty good. To your point, it's a pretty good schedule after that. They're at the Vikings, where they'll get to play a rookie quarterback or Sam Darnold, who they know well from his year last year with them. They're at the Rams. Okay, fine. That's always a pain in the butt game between those two guys, but home to the Patriots in Week 4, home to the Cardinals in Week 5. They're at Seattle. If you have to do a Thursday night game, that's the Thursday night game. But if you have to travel on a short week, they're just going up from San Francisco to Seattle. That's not that bad, and they seem to always dominate Seattle on Thursday night football. Then they got 2 tough ones, home to the Chiefs and Cowboys, but then they get a bye, and then the rest of the schedule, is a little more up and down. But still, I think one of the things that I think this is good that they get off to this sort of an easy start, because the 49ers last year were one of the oldest teams in the NFL in terms of just age. And the other thing about the 49ers is last year, for the most part, they stayed pretty healthy. They didn't have any massive injuries. Debo missed some time for sure, but they really didn't have massive injuries. And in fact, no one was sure what was going to happen with Brock Purdy, and he came back, and he was Brock Purdy. Yep. I mean, when you think about him in the NFC Championship game. So that's going to be a key to the 49ers. Can they stay healthy again this year? The fact that their schedule isn't as tough, I think, certainly at the beginning, helps that.
Yep, 4 of the first 6 opponents with those sub-8 win totals, and then also the 8th opponent, the Dallas Cowboys, who they just destroy every single time that they play them, often on NBC. Last year, and they probably will again in Week 8.
Of course, bye week's a massive factor in fantasy. This year, Matthew, the bye-mageddon weeks, Week 12, you have the Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jaguars, Saints, and Jets. And then Week 14, the Ravens, Broncos, Texans, Colts, Patriots, and your Commanders. Those weeks are just absolutely loaded with fantasy-relevant buys.
Really are. And what's crazy is because most fantasy leagues start their playoffs in Week 15. It's weeks 15 through 17. So Week 14, win and get in week, which is it's such a crucial week in fantasy, and massive amounts of fantasy stars. Obviously, all the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. The Broncos guys. You got C.J. Stroud and all of his wide receivers, Nacua Collins, Stefon Diggs, they're out. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman out. I guess Ramondre Stevenson, and look, and the Commanders. I think whether it's Terry McLaurin, we think Jaden Daniels is going to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback as well. Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. So there's going to be a lot of fantasy relevant players out in the week in which you need to win to get into the fantasy playoffs. Week 12 as well. The bye weeks in Week 12. I just want to bring this up real quickly, and then we'll talk about how to address it. But Week 12. Kirk Cousins is on. It's a brutal quarterback week, especially. Week 12, on bye, Kirk Cousins, Josh Allen, FantasyLife.com investor Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, and Derek Carr.
I was going to say, skip Derek Carr.
Rightfully so.
Jump right there.
Spencer Rattler's playing
right. But my point is that 5 very fantasy relevant quarterbacks in Week 12, where you're 3 weeks away from getting into the playoffs, are going to be out in Week 12, and that's before we get into any injuries or anything like that. And I just think that I don't know that affects how you draft necessarily, but I think this is something we'll obviously talk about on Fantasy Football Happy Hour as we get into the season. But if you're sitting there and you get off to a tough start, and you're 3-4, you're 4-5, and you're sort of looking at it and I basically need to win out, or I need to play 750 ball the rest of the way to make the playoffs. And you're sitting there going oh man, I've got a bunch of guys that are going to be on bye in Week 12 or bye 14. You got to start making trades then, because you're just not going to be able to handle that. Just the fact that you've got the 2 weeks where 6 teams are on a bye are 12 and 14, which are so crucial to try to get into the fantasy playoffs, I think is something that you'll have to keep an eye on as you see sort of how your roster gets constructed.
Yeah, particularly Week 14. And that's enough to potentially, if you're weighing up between, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, who are right next to each other in the rankings, the fact that Daniels is going to be out Week 14 and Caleb Williams, his bye isn't 12 or 14, that can be a material factor.
No question.
DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NBA, and during the playoffs, new customers can bet $5 and pocket $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. All right, let's jump back into Matthew's positional rankings.
That's what I'm going to get you and Kristen for your wedding.
DraftKings gift card?
Yeah, DraftKings bonus bets.
I love that. That'd be a great creative wedding gift. Because you got to realize, as I go to my mailroom every other day, none of this stuff is for me.
Right.
None
it's
of
all
this
for Kristen. When you guys did when you did your registry, were you consulted or was it all Kristen?
I begged for one item on there. And it took a while for it to get listed.
What is that item?
Like the stove fire pit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a pretty awesome fire pit. And one of my buddies came through.
Oh, did he? I was going to say, I don't think I haven't looked at all.
The rest is just thousands of plates, forks, knives, a new toaster. We had a perfectly fine toaster.
Right.
Perfectly adequate. Functioning
two-slice
toaster.
Right.
Now we have another
toaster. Now you got a backup toaster.
Now I have another 2-slice.
You've got Tyrod Toaster.
Yeah, Tyrod Toaster.
That might be a good nickname this year.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Very clever, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I didn't have much say in the registry. So DraftKings bonus bets are welcome.
Bonus bets, maybe.
And Applebee's gift cards.
Applebee's gift cards. Riblets for the entire family.
Yeah. What we should do is get DraftKings to price an over-under for years married, and then you place the bonus bet on the over, and then you show Kristen the bet slip.
Yes.
That'd be beautiful. That's what happiness is all about.
Or put all the money on the under, and then you just blow it up.
Right, and then walk away. Leave the country.
Yeah.
I won't be hosting the show anymore. I'll be rich.
Exactly not. You'll be rich. Yeah, exactly. You'll be rich.
An alt line.
Yeah, exactly.
29 and a half days.
Exactly.
Plus 800.
Just completely blow it up, and then you're on an island. Looking good, Billy Ray. Feeling good, Lewis. Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy.
Let's get back to your positional rankings. We got pass catchers this week. If you missed it last week, go watch the quarterbacks and running backs. All right, let's jump into the wide receivers here. CeeDee Lamb leads the list. I think we could just almost stop right there, Matthew. CeeDee Lamb over, but followed by Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Your previous ride or die, a good choice, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Puka Nacua makes the top 10. A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave. But CeeDee Lamb, Mr. Number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I call him 8,
well,
but
his
he's
friends
my
only do
buddy,
that.
my buddy 8.
I call him CeeDee Lamb.
But we may have to call him Mr. Number 1. I think the argument is like, and listen, if you're in a draft and with me and I see Tyreek Hill's the first guy off the board or Jamar Chase, like I'm obviously not going to be like, well, what are you doing there? But
Panic pick.
the argument for CeeDee Lamb at number 1 is a couple of different things. First off, again, to be the number 1 player at a position, you don't have to finish the year at number 1 to be worth that. It's more about floor. Like, you don't want to screw that up. I mean, again, we saw it with Jefferson and Jamar Chase last year, who missed significant amounts of time. So I think the floor with CeeDee Lamb is just so insanely high. When you think about what this Cowboys team did in the offseason, which is nothing. They let Michael Gallup go. They didn't sign a significant running back, all due respect to Zeke. I mean, CeeDee Lamb had 135 receptions last year. He had a 30% target share. He had at least 10 targets in 9 of his final 11 games. And this is a team that's just going to have to throw all the time. And, it's CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson. Honestly, they didn't add any target competition for CeeDee Lamb. They didn't add anything in the backfield. Dak Prescott is back. 135 receptions last year. So I just think, barring something health-wise, I don't see how CeeDee Lamb isn't a top 3 fantasy wide receiver this year. And so just that floor and volume and his obvious talent makes me feel like, he's the easy case for number 1.
Yeah, I think the other floor factors too. One, just playing in the dome, playing in Jerry World. The fact that he doesn't have to deal with weather like Jamar Chase does, for instance, that's big. The other thing too is Dak Prescott. Outside of when he breaks his leg in a freak accident, basically, doesn't get hurt. Dak Prescott very solid on that front. Dak also coming off his best season. And CeeDee Lamb, I mean, he got better as the season wore on last year too. He's still young, doesn't get hurt. They move him around in different areas. It's great. I think I always look for floor with receivers in guys who can go into the slot, because that is just such a matchup shaker. The fact that if you can go inside into the slot like CeeDee Lamb can, it really changes the game.
He's matchup proof once he does that as well. And to your point about Dak Prescott, as long as you're not in a fantasy playoff league, you know what I mean? No, but Dak is a very good regular season quarterback. Jokes aside, he is, and he will get the ball to CeeDee Lamb. Again, we talk about floor. 75% of his games last year, CeeDee Lamb had at least 15 or more fantasy points. Just week in, week out consistency. His talent and that offense and lack of target competition. CeeDee Lamb is my number 1 fantasy football wide receiver.
I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a professional bettor and talking about how, the idea that certain guys, they choke in the playoffs, that doesn't get based into lines. That's more just the narrative thing. But he was like, I think I'm at the point where I need to account for this with Dak Prescott, because it's every single year.
Every year.
Which is a shame. And to be fair, he was awesome against Tom Brady in Brady's last game against the Bucs in a playoff game. Dak was awesome. Not awesome the following week against the Niners. Not awesome against Green Bay. But it's sad. I mean, Dak's got 100% approval rating. Everyone loves Dak. Everyone wants Dak to succeed. It's just in these playoff games, seems to get a little tight.
He is, by all accounts, an awesome human being.
Walter Payton Man of the Year.
Awesome. By all accounts, a awesome human being. I've met him once briefly for 30 seconds, and he couldn't have been more pleasant, in the very brief time that I met him. I did think, did you see Brady at the upfronts? Just take a random shot at Tom Brady, just a random shot at Dak, because he's calling the Cowboys game. So we'll see. I feel bad for Dak. It would be nice. Listen, I'm a Commanders fan, so I hate the Cowboys, but on a personal level,
maybe
do
he needs
root for
to turn
Dak.
heel. Maybe he needs to be less nice.
Maybe that's the issue. But regardless of his playoff success or lack thereof, the fact of the matter is that Dak Prescott is going to get the ball to CeeDee Lamb early and often in scoring situations many, many, many times next year.
Justin Jefferson at number 4, Matthew. Is this largely because of the uncertainty at the quarterback position for the Vikings?
I think it's a combination of both the uncertainty at the quarterback position and slightly increased target share. Again, you have to compare him to Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, right, and CeeDee Lamb. So you have to nitpick here. He's got the worst quarterback of the 4 of them. He's got, target competition from Jordan Addison and Hockenson when he comes back. And he's not bulletproof. Last year, significant injury. And now you have to factor that in. Was that a fluke? Or suddenly is injury into his profile?
Yeah. The fact that it was a hamstring as well, that concerns you a bit more.
Lingers,
the soft tissue stuff, as opposed to had he just, broken his wrist or something, that would be, more flukish. But Jefferson, I mean, before that he was very healthy for the majority of his career, but does introduce a little bit more uncertainty. Why does the graphic say El Jefe? Have we called Jefferson El Jefe? I've never heard that in my life.
Well,
Pro Football Reference nickname?
We're doing that now.
El Jefe? What?
But also, by the way,
that's not a thing.
I think this is
Who put this together?
Damien probably.
Jay's on a warpath.
Yeah, exactly.
El Jefe.
Penn State Blake's final gift.
Yeah, exactly.
This graphic.
I'll tell you right now. El Jefe is going to become a thing on this show.
100%. He's never going back.
I'm going to make it. But look,
I like that you both are saying Jefe, by the way.
Yeah.
I know it's in Spanish, it's El Jefe, but this isn't a word. That's not a Spanish word. There's a second F. Thus, it becomes a new word.
So the important part, though, of that graphic, other than the fact that, yes, El Jefe is his nickname. I don't know where you've been, but everyone calls him El Jefe. His mom has since he was a little kid. Everyone knows this. Was that the numbers there, those were Justin Jefferson's numbers without Kirk Cousins, and they were all very impressive. The fact he is somewhat quarterback proof. But when you're at this level, you have to start nitpicking, and so you got to put them in some sort of order. And so, if you're sitting there, Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, you'd rather a guy catching passes from their Joe Burrow than a rookie, right? You're Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill. You'd rather the guy catching passes from Tua and getting plays called by Mike McDaniel than the guy catching passes from a rookie. Even though I like Kevin O'Connell as a play caller. And it's
not Caleb Williams. Like, this wasn't the first quarterback off the board as well. There's questions around J.J. McCarthy.
And by the way, it might be Sam Darnold.
It very well could be.
It is not like we feel very confident that Jane Daniels is going to start, right? That we know Caleb Williams is going to start. I feel pretty confident that Bo Nix is going to start.
Yeah.
I don't know that we don't know yet in terms of Drake May or J.J. McCarthy if they're the starter week 1.
Yeah, and we know Michael Penix is not.
We certainly know Michael Penix is not.
Yeah. It's kind of a tough scene for Kevin O'Connell. He went through 3 quarterbacks at the end of last year. None of them were any good, and now he goes through. Now he's got 2 more. It's like, these guys any good either? He might go through 5 quarterbacks in a row, and none of them.
I think McCarthy landed in the. You're much obviously deeper talent evaluator than I am, and so you've studied a lot more McCarthy tape than I have at this point. But I feel like, and if he went to a different situation, I might feel differently. But going to Minnesota, where you've got a coach in Kevin O'Connell, a former pro quarterback, Kevin O'Connell as well, and somebody that has developed quarterbacks and worked with Stafford, and I feel like that's a good landing spot. He's having Jefferson and Hockenson and Addison, it's an unbelievable landing spot for a guy that isn't going to have to be able to, carry the load the way some other quarterbacks have in previous years, where you're just Justin Fields when he went to the Bears, it was just like, sorry dude, it's all you. Figure it out. Right?
It's McCarthy's best landing spot.
Correct.
By far. The last one we want to talk about on this list here, Matthew, in the top 10, Puka Nacua comes in at number 6. Just an unbelievable, historic rookie season for Puka Nacua. And now,
Jay Croucher's best friend. Did you ever see the picture of just Jay Croucher and Puka Nacua?
And you and I, nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be found.
We weren't even on the interview.
Listen.
We'd already done. We were sitting next to Jay.
It was a 4-man desk, but it was a 2-man show. And so me and Puka
just hanging out.
Yeah.
For a while. Is he still your avatar on Twitter?
He is, and he will continue to be.
Quite some time.
Yeah. Unless he falls off a cliff this season.
Jay only updates after Super Bowl Radio Row Week. George Kittle, he was with George Kittle for a year. Now it's with Puka Nacua for a year.
I've got some other good content. Like if Saquon Barkley goes off, then all of a sudden I got a little clip where I'm next to him as well and cut Matthew out.
Yeah, exactly. Next year we're gonna switch it up so that you're like
the far guy.
You're the far guy.
Yeah. Yes.
And so then what you'll have to do is you'll take a picture and it'll just put black dots over our faces. So it's just
blur.
Just blur it out. So how some of the cameras they'll say you can blur, with some of those phones, with new phones, pixel us out. So it'll just look like you're hanging with just you and Puka, but it's COVID times because you're going to be so far apart. You're have to wipe out me and Connor in between.
It's not.
There you go. Here's the photo.
Yeah. You would never know.
You never know that literally Jay and I, as Connor and I, are sitting next to Jay Croucher.
This is a man show.
Yeah, exactly.
And they both leaned in
Puka
together, which made it way worse for us, Matthew.
We're
just there somewhere.
No, it's outrageous. Beautiful.
We'll have to call in Emmett Smith and have his take on if this is
I got a photo of just me and Emmett as well.
Yes, I'm sure you did.
What's going to be great? What's going to be great is tomorrow night when Jay posts just him and Kristen in a wedding dress. Yeah. He's going to take a picture with
great
the two
time
of
at the
you
wedding.
guys. Great time at the wedding, and it's just going to be him and Kristen.
It checks out.
No, it'd be like Kristen, Connor, me, and Bart Scott, and I'll cut out Kristen and Connor. me
great
and
time
Bart.
at Connor and Kristen's wedding.
That's great.
It's lovely.
No, my biggest advice, though, we talked about marriage advice before. Biggest single advice, you really need to value and play the seating arrangement and the standing arrangement. It's so key. And I manifested that at the Super Bowl Radio Row. But if you're in a seating arrangement or a standing arrangement and there's a girl that you want to talk to or a boy you want to talk to, you need to maneuver that situation to get in the optimal spot, because you can sink. You can absolutely sink just by virtue of a wrong seating or standing arrangement.
That's all very good advice. I agree with that.
Jay will be at the wedding 8 hours early to avoid sitting next to you.
Yeah, sure.
That's basically what you've been told.
Totally fine. That's good.
All right, so Puka Nacua, great rookie season, comes in at number 6. What else needs to be said?
So 12 games. We all know those monster games that Puka had when Kupp was out, right? And he became a thing. But I think what's important is you look at the 12 games in which Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp played together. In those 12 games in which Cooper Kupp was on the field, Puka Nacua still had a 27% target share. He averaged 15.7 fantasy points per game, which was good enough for wide receiver 12 on a points per game basis. And now it's second year in the league. They know what Puka can do. And the fact is that the offensive line is better. Stafford is back. They added Demarcus Robinson as well. Like, this offense basically returns intact. But now I have Puka over Cooper Kupp. I mean, he's still my little Cooper Kupp, but let's be clear. It feels like if you're drafting a Rams wide receiver, I don't know how you don't have Nacua over Kupp, given the injury history of Kupp and sort of what Nacua did last year.
Yeah, so that is the question with Kupp, because Kupp's not in this top 10. He's not going to be on the next screen either in the top 20. Now, Cooper Kupp is 2 years younger than Connor, and Connor looks like he's 19 years old. So Cooper Kupp, are we just writing him off? Like, is he just going?
No, we're not writing him off, but there's now. I mean, he's 2 years in a row. He's had health issues, and he now has target competition, whereas he didn't before. He still has number one wide receiver in fantasy upside. We've seen that before. We've seen that in recent memory. But I don't think you're writing him off, and I think he's going to be a popular sleeper in terms of because of where he's going to go in drafts and where he's currently going in drafts among ADP. But there is risk with Cooper Kupp that wasn't there before because of the emergence of Nacua and because of the injuries the last 2 years.
Yep. And again with Kupp, soft tissue.
Soft tissue, exactly.
That's you don't want.
Right.
Yep.
Let's look at 11 through 20 here. Marvin Harrison Jr., rookie, almost makes the top 10 there. 12, Brandon Aiyuk. 13, Nico Collins. We know how good that Texans core is. 14, Davante Adams. 15, Mike Evans. A lot of familiar veteran names. 16, DJ Moore with what we think will be an upgrade at quarterback, and Caleb Williams. Michael Pittman Jr. at 17. Stefon Diggs, another Texans wide receiver on this list at 18. Deebo Samuel at 19 and Jalen Waddle at 20. So a familiar theme on this list, Matthew, is that it's a lot of guys that are maybe playing alongside a great wide receiver in an offense already, or once upon a time were true wide receiver number ones. And then Marvin Harrison at the top.
Well,
the new kid on the block.
But all of these guys are going to get massive target shares, right? You look here, all of them play with the exception of one or two people that we'll talk about in a second, but all of them are going to play with above average to good quarterbacks. All of them should get massive target shares. And the ones that are on the same team, like Aiyuk and Deebo, or Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs, we have belief in those offenses to be able to support multiple fantasy relevant wide receivers. We've seen it in over the years with Cincinnati and Chase and Higgins, right? And so there's lots of different examples. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith last year, for example. Other examples. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. On and on and on we go. So Harrison, I just think he's got Kyler Murray, right? And that offense is going to be better than you think, and he's immediately going to be the alpha dog, right? He's immediately, like Connor, you've said it multiple times, best player in the draft.
Yeah, pro ready, everything you want. True number one wide receiver.
Not
Size,
best wide
speed,
receiver, best player.
player. I thought he was the best player in the draft. Going back to last summer, never moved him off that spot for my board.
Yeah, so we expect obviously, and Kyler Murray's no dummy.
Right. He's got to know where to go throw the ball, especially when he's running for his life.
Exactly. So we'll talk a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk. I think, again, this is assuming he starts the season on the 49ers, that he's not traded, and that all gets worked out. But we talked about the easy schedule for the 49ers, at least at the start of the season. Obviously, Brock Purdy fully healthy. He had every game where he got at least 6 targets. He averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game. Big playability, right? Only Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb had more plays of 20 or more yards than Brandon Aiyuk last year. Led all players in terms of yards per target last season. So just big playability. Deebo Samuel gets, I think, a lot of publicity because he makes kind of these crazy plays and these runs that, where people are bouncing off of him. But Brandon Aiyuk is the number one wide receiver on the 49ers. And that's one of the best offenses in football.
Yep. Aiyuk is interesting because the advanced stats on him are significantly better than just the counting stats because there are so many superstars on that team. To your point about the yards per target, also 6th in yards per route run, 2nd in PFF grade. This guy's an absolute monster. I just don't think he's being fully maximized in terms of the counting stats he can accrue just because of the other players on that team. But, I mean, there is a world where Deebo gets traded, Ricky Pearsall is like the number 2 wide receiver, and then all of a sudden Brandon Aiyuk is a top 5 wide receiver in football.
Especially because the way that offense runs, they use Kittle as a blocker a lot more than most pass-catching tight ends. I mean, I don't want to say Kittle's only a pass-catching tight end. He's not, but he's obviously such a weapon in the receiving game. You sort of think, well, what about Kittle? And the fact is that, well, no, because they actually need Kittle. Kittle's actually a great blocker as well as a tight end.
14 on this list, Davante Adams. I mean, questionable quarterback situation. They didn't come out of the draft with one, but at the end of the day, Davante Adams, just the target share he commands each year, Matthew, still highly effective in fantasy.
I went back and looked at this. So yes, questionable quarterback situation from an NFL perspective and knowing that you really want in fantasy, but the fact is we're expecting it to be Gardner Minshew. And last year there were 12 games in which Gardner Minshew started for the Colts. And in those 12 games, Michael Pittman averaged over 10 targets a game, over 7 receptions a game. Is Gardner Minshew great? No, he is not. Is he good enough to get the ball to an alpha wide receiver? He is. He showed it last year with with Michael Pittman. I mean, we've seen it at various times, in whether it was in Jacksonville or a couple games with Philadelphia a couple games ago. So Davante Adams, who has 4 straight years with 100 plus receptions, he's still Davante Adams. And again, they play in a dome. And they play in a dome, by the way, in the fantasy playoffs 3 straight games. So I just think people are going to be, I think Davante Adams might be of value this year because people are going to say, they want to run. Davante Adams is old. We're over it.
Yeah, they took Brock Bowers.
Whatever. He's got Minshew throwing to him. There's nothing sexy about Davante Adams, but he's on a pure talent basis. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
Yeah. It's also he didn't have a bad year last year. It feels like he had a bad year. He still went over 100 receptions, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. And I think, to your point about Minshew, the sins of Gardner Minshew are these individual moments of madness. It's the turnovers or it's getting strip sacked or it's how did you not see that guy, Gardner? But he can make the throws. Unless it's the Tyler Goodson
I was just going to say, or throwing it just behind Tyson Goodson when you're with the season on the line. Right.
He will be able to get Davante Adams his stats.
I think one of the more tricky ones on this list, guys, is Stefon Diggs. Because down the stretch last year, Matthew, Stefon Diggs looked nothing like the player we're used to seeing. And while we love that he plays with C.J. Stroud now, he was already playing with Josh Allen. This wide receiver room is very crowded with talent. And that's not just factoring the guy you have ahead of him in Nico Collins, but the return of Tank Dell.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. I think that from the Texans' point of view, you make the trade for Stefon Diggs and you pay the money because you have C.J. Stroud. You've struck gold with C.J. Stroud and you have him on a rookie deal. So your window to win is right now because you're going to have to pay Stroud at some point, obviously. So your window to win is right now. It's worth noting the Texans ranked 8th in wide receiver target share last year. This is a guy in Stefon Diggs, 4 straight years with 100 receptions and 150 targets. At least 150 targets in 4 straight years. We always talk about targets are earned. And so I get it. He was brutal down the stretch last year. He wasn't even a top 40 wide receiver on a points per game basis over his final 8 games. But I don't think you make that trade if you're the Texans. If you're DeMeco Ryans or you're Bobby Slowick, you don't make that trade unless you're going to make Stefon Diggs a thing. The issues in Buffalo weren't quiet. We know it. Everyone saw the tweets. Everyone saw how it just went south down the stretch. Yeah. So you don't disrupt a young team with a problem if you're not going to feed the guy the ball. And so I think the trade of Diggs does a couple of things. I think number one, it's another veteran weapon for C.J. Stroud. They want to throw the ball, and it also protects against Tank Dell health. Right? I mean, who knows how will Tank Dell be ready for the season?
It's a 160-pound receiver.
100% right. So, and there's always it's like kind of a chicken or egg thing. You can make the argument, now he's got a lot more target competition. Well, also, by the way, he's also going to see a lot more single coverage. Like if you're a defensive coordinator, you're sitting there like, all right, I got to deal with Tank Dell, Stefon Diggs, and Nico Collins. One of those guys is going to be in single coverage on every play. And so, and with Stefon Diggs, he's a guy that has the ability to make your week on one play. All he needs is one play. He's got that kind of big play ability. So, you feel like if you're the Texans, like even though the volume may not be there as much, the matchups are so much better that, maybe he makes up for it in efficiency. It will be fascinating to see what the Texans offense looks like with him and a healthy Tank Dell and a second-year C.J. Stroud. I'm at 18. That's the lowest I've had Stefon Diggs in quite some time.
Yeah. I think the concern would be, and it's obvious, there is a material chance he's the third most talented wide receiver on that team. The way that Tank Dell was playing before he got hurt, he was playing like a monster. I think Nico Collins is just better than Stefon Diggs at this point. And I think that's kind of inarguable unless you think there was something physically wrong with Diggs after week 6 or 7 last year. So that would be the concern. And I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of 6 for 66 type of weeks coming for Diggs. And I think they're going to run the ball. I thought they ran the ball too much last year in Slowick's offense. They got Joe Mixon in there, but certainly Diggs, he's a very high variance player. Like, he could just be Stefon Diggs again, and he could be wide receiver.
That's why I'm at 18. I'm at 18. I'm making the case for Diggs. Yeah. Understand I also have him in a dynasty league, so I need him to be good desperately. I traded for him in the middle of the season last year, and only to watch him tank. And I was first place at the beginning of the year. I was first place in the middle of the season. Traded for Diggs, like, this is gonna put me over the top. Ended up finishing 4th. Thanks, Stefon Diggs. Had some bad injuries down the stretch, too. What are you going to do? But I'm clearly over it, so that's great. So I'm making the case for Diggs because I believe, I believe in my heart I want this to happen. But I completely agree. Like, him being a top 5 wide receiver wouldn't shock me. Him being the guy we saw down the stretch and being like, wide receiver 35 or 40 also wouldn't shock me. Very high variance there, but I'm at 18 because, honestly, if you look who I have after him, Deebo Samuel, also high variance. He's somebody that deals with injuries and could be on a different team, right? Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle had,
Gets banged up. He gets banged up.
He gets banged up, and he had games where he just completely disappeared last year as well, fantasy-wise. So I feel really good about 1 through 17, and then
we're gonna see what happens.
Then we'll mess around and find out.
Let's look at the tight end rankings here, and we'll start with the top 10. You already brought up, Matthew, Sam Laporta sits at the top. Big change in the fantasy landscape after seeing Travis Kelce there for so long, who comes in at number 2. No surprise at 3, Mark Andrews. Trey McBride with a big-time breakout season in year 2. He comes in at number 4. Evan Ingram at number 5, resurgent Evan Ingram since arriving in Doug Peterson's offense in Jacksonville. Dalton Kincaid, who was quietly very good in his rookie season for the Bills, at 6. Kyle Pitts at 7, just when we thought we were out, we get pulled back in. 8, George Kittle. 9, Jake Ferguson. And 10, David Njoku. I think it's more interesting to start with the breakout here, Matthew, and Trey McBride all the way at number 4, and hopefully a full season of Kyler Murray.
Well, and that's the key here. You think about week 10, right? That's when Kyler Murray returned. Weeks 10 through 18, Trey McBride was the 3rd best tight end in fantasy on a points per game basis. He had at least a 20% target share in every single game that Kyler Murray started. And now, second year, back with a full, healthy Kyler Murray, not as much defensive attention thanks to the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. But again, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Trey McBride's going to be, the second most important. He'll be the number 2 passing option in that air attack. And we think Kyler Murray's a pretty good quarterback. So I don't know. I just feel like McBride, friend of the podcast, Trey McBride, by the way, is somebody that should improve upon last year in a big way. Just having a full year of Kyler.
Jay, can you buy back in on Kyle Pitts this year?
I've been hurt by Kyle Pitts a
Kirk
lot
Cousins
over the journey.
in town, Arthur Smith out of town.
Exactly. That's the key. Arthur Smith out, Kirk Cousins in.
To me, the bigger thing with Pitts, and obviously that helps a lot, but is he just physically not the same guy anymore, Connor? Because he just doesn't look the same.
No, I just think the lateral movement's been disappointing. I know he can run vertical and outrun linebackers, but you just wonder if he can become more of a possession player, not relying on big plays, and we're going to see if Cousins can get that out of him.
Cousins has traditionally liked using his tight end. You go back to all the way from Washington to Minnesota. So the tight end just in general, right?
McVay coaching tree,
right?
With Zach Robinson there. So
exactly.
That
so
matters.
So I feel like that, and so what's weird is for his career he's got a 20% target share, which since he entered the NFL, that's 6th best among NFL tight ends. Like, it's weird. Like, he gets looks, right? He's had such brutal quarterback play.
Yeah.
They're going to be in scoring position more often under Kirk Cousins. It's going to be a better quarterback room as well. So he's going to get better targets, more targets on target. They're going to be in red zone more, where he is a weapon and a mismatch for there. So, I have him at 7. I think I'm in on Kyle Pitts this year.
Okay.
Because I'm buying into Kyle. It's not a schedule that scares you, and I'm a believer in Kirk Cousins as a quarterback, certainly in terms of being able to support fantasy-relevant players.
Yep. He's an interesting one because I think everyone is going to be in on Kyle Pitts just because all the factors line up. Obviously, the guy went 4 in the draft very recently, has shown flashes, and now he gets by far the best quarterback situation of his life, and big name. And
1,000 yards as a rookie.
Yeah, exactly.
Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards as a rookie.
So there is all of that. And I mean, he does, if you told me Kyle Pitts ends as a top 2 tight ends, that's not surprising at all, really. And I think, he's got more upside than guys like Evan Engram, certainly, I think. But also, I think someone like Jake Ferguson might have a higher floor than Kyle Pitts, just because Ferguson is so kind of rock solid and locked into that.
There's more variance in Kyle Pitts for sure. But I don't know. If Kyle Pitts were coming out today in the NFL draft, where would he have gone?
Bowers would have gone ahead of him. I'll say that. I think that needs to be distinguished. But, he would probably still be looked at as a back end of the first round talent. You just can't teach that kind of athleticism and size and raw ability. And he was highly productive as a rookie, as you said. That's what we quickly forget.
Yeah.
So it is really tricky. And it kind of brings me to the next point, the guys behind him.
Kyle Pitts is one of those guys that, could once again be but he'll be a value this year because there's so many people that have been burned by him year after year. But Kyle Pitts also could be a league winner.
Sure.
Number 1 tight end fantasy is not out of the realm because of Cousins and Pitts'. I'm not saying I predict it, but I'm just saying that's not a crazy statement either. He's given his potential ability and a good quarterback, and honestly, there's not a ton of target competition outside of Drake London.
Yep.
We like Darnell Mooney or whatever, but come on, let's get real.
Sorry, Darnell Mooney.
Whatever.
Checkdowns to Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, but Kyle Pitts is probably going to be the number 2 option in that passing game, a passing game that we think is going to be pretty good.
Yep. I do think there is immense upside there because you kind of sit back and you picture what an Atlanta Falcons game is going to look like, and you picture Kirk Cousins dropping back. Well, it's really just Drake London or Kyle Pitts that he's going to be throwing to, right? So, there is immense upside there.
All right, number 9, Jake Ferguson. Jay brought him up briefly. Matthew, with Ferguson, he just benefits from the red zone looks he gets, and it kind of goes back to our original conversation today, with CeeDee Lamb being the number 1 wide receiver. No other pass catchers really in this offense, and that's helped Ferguson right away.
Yeah, they have Brandon Cooks.
He's fine.
He's fine. He had some nice moments last year, but Ferguson really came out. Last year, only 1 tight end had more end zone targets than Jake Ferguson, right? He led all tight ends in red zone targets. So when they get in close, when they're inside the 20, and especially when they're within scoring position, Dak Prescott is looking for Jake Ferguson as well. You think about the last time we saw him, that playoff loss to Green Bay, 10 for 93, 3 touchdowns for Jake Ferguson. He was just an absolute beast as well. You see there, more red zone targets than Travis Kelce or David Njoku. I think it's going to be a pass-first offense with a good quarterback and not a lot of target competition. Ferguson, my tight end 9.
Let's look at rankings 11 through 20, which starts with Dallas Goedert, followed by TJ Hockenson coming back from season-ending injury. 13, Dalton Schultz. 14, the rookie Brock Bowers. 15, Cole Kmet. 16, Pat Freiermuth. 17, Juwan Johnson. You like Juwan Johnson, huh?
Well, I don't think you remember. Don't you remember stupid Dev trying to screw me out of the tight ends in the finals?
And he did technically literally win you the league.
And Juwan Johnson had the greatest game of his life. I knew he would. I predicted he would. So Juwan Johnson always drinks free at the happy hour. Juwan Johnson, when he gets it, listen, when Juwan Johnson gets work, he produces 5 targets last year. In games in which he saw at least 5 targets, he averaged over 13 fantasy points per game. So Juwan Johnson, we love Juwan Johnson. TikTok star Juwan Johnson.
18, Hunter Henry. 19, K. Dot, and 20, Noah Fant. I think I mean, the guy we have to talk about on this list is TJ Hockenson.
Sure.
Because he comes in at number 12 strictly because of injury, Matthew, and just the variable of when the hell is he going to be back.
Yeah, this is a ranking that's going to change significantly as we get closer to the season and we get a better sense of the timeline on Hockenson. Could he begin the season on the physically unable to perform list? Certainly makes sense. A typical ACL injury, and everyone's different, but a typical one is usually 9 to 11 months. He injured it in week 16. He had surgery on January 29th. So just sort of, you start doing math at the calendar and sort of looking and you're like, probably mid-season, and whatever game he comes back, you're not using him. You're like, I want to see him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you want to see him. Well, also, there's questions at quarterback. Like we think McCarthy and Darnold will be okay, but like you sort of want to see what this offense looks like. You want to see who's going to be the quarterback. What do they look like? And when do we know Hockenson's coming back? So he's outside the top 10 because if you had to draft today, you can't feel confident about Hockenson as your number one tight end because we just don't know how many games he's going to play.
Yep.
If he were 100% healthy, he's a top 3 guy.
Like 5, yeah, 4.
Yeah, he's a top 3 guy.
Actually, yeah, he's probably 3 because he's above Trey McBride, right?
Yeah, I mean,
it's close.
It's close. It's close with the quarterback, yeah, but he's top 5. He's definitely top 5. Hockenson would be, and yeah. So I mean, I think he's at 12 because of all the question marks.
Yep. Connor, on Matthew's best friend Juwan Johnson, what's this guy's talent level? Because 2 years ago he's like this touchdown merchant who every week would be set on DraftKings, 24.5 receiving yards. Then he played this game that won Matthew's championship against the Bucs in week 17, which cost me a lot of money. I was on the Bucs that day. But that day, he looked like Antonio Gates. He's making these insane plays.
He's an athlete.
He knew
he's
what
a
he was.
converted wide receiver.
He understood the assignment.
He understood the assignment.
He understood the assignment. I got it. Live at noon on the cock is desperate for me to bring home the title, and he did. Juwan Johnson showed up.
And keep
like
in mind
real champions.
How little activity this team made at pass catcher in the offseason as well. That aids him. That aids players like him.
It certainly
and
does.
A summer of me talking about Rashid Shaheed all over again.
Yeah.
So.
Michael Thomas.
Yes.
My man.
He's out there.
So he's still unsigned, right?
Yeah, we're actually going to transition to some of the guys that have signed, and
There you
he's
go.
somehow still out there when you hear these names.
Somehow.
She comes to my New York Giants. I'll buy a Michael Thomas jersey. I'll do it.
Get the Spider-Man one.
You watch me.
Yeah. NBC Sports Championship season moved by pods continues this Saturday with the Preakness Stakes as race favorite Mystic Dan looks to capture another crown after his win in Louisville. That's at 4:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, guys, let's close out with the Rotoworld player news. I'm really getting close to being at this wedding. Some big news here, Matthew, that don't involve Michael Thomas. The Cardinals signed wide receiver Zay Jones. I'm out right at this point. I can't speak. Formerly of the Jacksonville Jaguars to a 1-year contract. So obviously this doesn't move the needle enough where it affects Marvin Harrison Jr., but maybe in this wide array, you have Michael Wilson there.
Yeah, Michael Wilson had some nice moments last year as well. And so who's going to be on the Marvin Harris? Greg Dortch is going to be in the Greg Dortch.
Do you want me to do the show?
No, it's fine. I told you I was an English minor in college. Greg Dortch.
So was I.
So
was
was
Connor.
I.
Very strange.
And none of us can speak.
Greg Dortch is going to be in the slot, and so so Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be on the outside, and who's opposite him on the other side? Is it Michael Wilson or is it Zay Jones? Zay Jones is a nice player when he's on the field.
That's been the issue.
I mean, right? He's just had so much injury issues. So many injury issues. Good Lord.
People?
I don't know. But if he can stay out there, like he's a nice player. It's just it's a 1-year prove-it deal.
Look at this group. I mean, you need a professional wide receiver in this room. You can't be like, hey, Marvin Harrison, here's 275 targets.
Right. So I wouldn't mind that.
That'd be great for all of us.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Cardinals is that if you were to choose a team that is going to be like one of those early Drew Brees Saints teams that goes 8-8 and puts up a ton of offensive stats, it'd be the Arizona Cardinals. Like their win total is 6.5. I think they'll go over. I think they'll be like a 7-10 team, and they're going to be trailing a lot. And they're going to be throwing a ton, and so someone has to soak up these stats. It's not just all going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. So I think that there is scope for Zay Jones. Zay Jones was like wide receiver 2 on the Jags for a little bit at a point
Some big
this
weeks.
season. So I think there is some scope that he could carve out a role. We'll be talking about Zay Jones on Tuesday waiver wire shows.
Exactly. Like you're not drafting Zay Jones, but except in a super deep league. But you could see a scenario where if he carves out that number 2 wide receiver role opposite Marvin Harrison, number 3 pass catcher behind him and McBride, Harrison and McBride, then you could sort of see like, all right, maybe there's some volume there. I mean, Dortch has had the human Dortch. He had some nice moments as well. Yeah, I think this is more of a negative to Michael Wilson's sleeper value than it is necessarily like, oh, Zay Jones is somebody you want to look for at the end of your draft.
Another team adding wide receiver depth. The Bills signed old favorite of the show, MVS, Marquez, Valdes-Scantling, to a 1-year deal. We're going to get one of those moments this year, right? Josh Allen, 70-yard rope.
Yeah, like, do you think it was one of those things that's like, hey, man, like, you know, you helped us against the Chiefs, you know, when we were playing the Chiefs.
Thank you.
Like, thank you. Here, come on over here. They scouted him at that Chiefs game, and they're like, we want more of that.
What was the bad one was against the Eagles, right? He dropped the game-winning touchdown.
It was game winner. Yeah.
He had a couple.
Really
He's had some really bad ones.
This is
I thought
Super Bowl champ.
I thought against the maybe I'm misremembering the game, but I thought wasn't the Chiefs Bills game he dropped a bad one too?
He definitely had at least 2 really bad drops this year.
I think
the Eagles was the one that lost
the Eagles was the one that lost the game.
Yeah,
but
there was one against. There was some Chiefs receiver dropping against the Packers as well. They've had a few. They won the Super Bowl somehow. I don't understand it.
This is an odd wide receiver room, Matthew. The Bills. Keon Coleman drafted in the 2nd round. Your boy Curtis Samuel. I mean, we like Khalil Shakir.
We like Khalil Shakir. By the way, you know who I like is Mac Hollins. Like, I do. I
Might
like
be wide receiver 1 on the team at this rate.
Here's the thing. Mac Hollins is also a deep threat. Like, they need field stretchers. After losing Diggs and Gabe Davis, they needed field stretchers. They draft Keon Coleman to be that. But they also, so they have these slot guys. They have Curtis Samuel, they have Shakir, they have Dalton Kincaid. They have these guys in the middle of the field. But they're like, we need some field stretchers. And so I'm not convinced MVS makes this team. You know, it does. No, seriously.
There's no lock.
Right?
No look at
this.
It's not loaded, but it's deep in terms of guys that could make the roster.
Do you think Marquez, Valdes-Scantling, Chase Claypool, and Mac Hollins all make this team, Jay Croucher? One of them doesn't.
It's such a strange team at the moment.
I think Andy Isabella is still on this roster.
Yeah, of course he is.
Yep.
Producer Damien's favorite, Andy Isabella. The world's only Andy Isabella fan is producer
Bring
Damien.
Back Lee Evans so get something going. So it's just there's randomly a team
Yeah,
just
why
doesn't
so
have,
serious?
They don't have Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer anymore, and Stefon Diggs is gone. Like it seems like they've been
big identity change.
Yeah, it's a strange season.
My point is that for Josh Allen, because Keon Coleman is a rookie, they need a veteran field stretcher that can, if nothing else, at least open up the underneath stuff for the pass catchers they do trust. And MVS, he can run wind sprints. He can.
Sure.
I mean, like,
so can I.
if you are a defensive not like him.
It's true.
Like,
That's a good
if you're a
point. He would
defensive
beat me
coordinator
otherwise.
and MVS is on the outside and running a deep post, you have to send a guy with him.
Somebody has to carry him. Yes.
That's the point. Whether you never throw it to him or not, like you have to address it. So it does open things up. He does need, if you're Josh Allen, you do need somebody that stretches the field, and Keon Coleman can do that, and Mac Hollins can do that, and in theory, MVS can do that. I don't know that there's any fantasy relevancy.
Like
if he does make the team, like typical MVS, he'll have 3 games over the course of the season where he catches a long bomb and he has like a monster fantasy game, and you'll have no idea when those games are coming.
Yep. It's like Chad Ochocinco on the Patriots. MVS, just running straight lines. The thing is with
Very
MVS, I will
forgettable
say,
era.
and everyone piles on MVS as we are doing right now, but AFC title game against the Bengals, the whole offense was just MVS, and MVS for a half just turned into the guy for Patrick Mahomes, and they don't win the Super Bowl without him. So good for you, MVS.
Yeah, but Bills' 3rd and deep pass attempts last year, and I know the offense changed a little bit from Dorsey to Joe Brady, but when you have a cannon of an arm, I'm assuming because I don't, but when you have a cannon of an arm the way Josh Allen does, proud Fantasy Life investor Josh Allen, when you have a cannon of an arm, like you want to chuck it, you want to use it. Because if you don't,
he certainly does.
Because if you don't use it, you lose it.
That's what they say.
Yeah, that's science.
MVS just texted me. He's not investing in fantasy life anymore after
all
this
his
segment.
funds.
He was going to. No, he's
wasn't
not.
invited to do so.
Our
Neither
last
you two.
bit of news here, guys. Broncos head coach Sean Payton spoke extensively on the backfield and if there'll be a competition this offseason. Take a listen.
Look, anytime, all these guys, they're all competing for they're competing for roles, spots, roster, but they're 2 guys that are under contract right now that we added. I think that we never put a cap on like what they're competing for. I want to see it, and then we'll go by what we see.
Quite the sound effects in the background of that.
Yeah, a lot going
Sean
on
Payton.
there.
Yeah, a lot of, coach speak, word vomit there. Javonte Williams obviously going to be a key factor of this backfield. Matthews, Samaje Perine's still there. Now you have Audric Estime in the fold, a power back, and then Jaleel McLaughlin, the total opposite, a scat back.
So before we dive into this, I just want to ask you, Connor Rogers, about Audric Estime, because I don't know if you did this, Jay. I don't know if you, but I was perusing awfulannouncing.com the other day.
As you do.
Yeah, as I do. And they wrote, I believe, 8 billion words all about Connor Rogers, Tampa Bay Trey, and the draft exchange, right?
Yeah,
the PFF draft exchange. Unbelievable article. Lots of nice pub for Connor Rogers. Article did not mention Connor also works with Barry and Croucher on another show. It was just him and Trevor. All about Trevor. But
Trevor is his Kristen. We're the backup plan.
Well,
He may or may not be at your table at the wedding, by the way.
Interesting.
wow.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But embedded in the article, and I actually do encourage you to go read the article because it's really nice. It's great pub. I'm happy for Connor and Trevor to get that love.
married.
But I tweeted the article. But what I'm going to tell you is that there's a whole running joke about Audric Estime from the Draft Exchange podcast.
Yes.
So you want to?
Well, there's like all prospects go through the full circle.
Yeah.
There was a point where Audric Estime, people were like screaming how underrated he was so
Okay.
much that he started to become overrated.
Okay.
So we had a joke basically at the point that the Patriots had to take Audric Estime third
third
overall.
overall.
They could not answer the phone. So every round went on. People were constantly in our mentions saying, how is Audric Estime still on the board?
available.
So the Broncos took
Right.
Audric Estime.
Yeah,
and
Audric
he will be
Estime
a
no matter
superstar.
what.
Audric Estime no matter what.
That's on the notepad.
So
yeah.
Audric Estime will be a thing
Okay.
at some point this
That's
season.
right.
And he will score.
Has anyone ever come up to you on the
touchdowns.
street to ask you about Audric Estime?
Trevor texted me about a week ago and said he was at whatever major golf event it was. I should know that. I work at NBC. Somebody came up to him and said, man, like something Audric Estime out there today. So it is.
I've had probably 6
Become a
people
thing.
come up to me about Michael Thomas.
I bet.
Just ask
When
them
you
about
get it
Michael
like
Thomas.
attached to a player publicly,
Oh, sure.
that's how people know you as the Michael Thomas guy.
Yeah, I'm the Michael
Who's it going to be
Thomas
this
guy.
year?
I don't know. Someone in the,
Michael Thomas again.
could be Michael Thomas
Double
again.
down.
He has to be on a team.
Yeah, someone on the Darius Slayton
How
type
about Daniel
of mold.
Jones? Stand by Daniel
Daniel
Jones.
Jones guy,
You're
really.
a Giants guy.
Yeah, you're a Giants guy.
I'll
I'll find a
Giants guy.
Giants. I'll find a Giant.
You know what? Tyrone Tracy. Although we've sort of already,
There you
go.
we've
Yeah, you
already
don't get
kind of
that.
claimed
Yeah,
Tyrone
you don't
Tracy.
get that.
No, I'll
You don't
find
get
someone
that.
more
Theo
niche
Johnson.
and worse.
There you go,
I do
Theo
like
Johnson.
Theo Johnson.
He's probably going to be the starting tight end if
you
Darren
go.
Waller ever makes up his mind.
Darren, we're going to play football? What's going on?
Giants don't know. So neither do
The
we.
rumors are he's going to retire.
Okay.
So we will. That Waller's
He was the
retiring,
missing
but-
piece to the Super Bowl push.
That was
Yeah.
the big move.
2025.
We will. We'll see. How about Jalen Hyatt? You should do.
I do like
you know
Jalen
what?
Hyatt.
Yeah, because we interviewed Jalen Hyatt on Super Bowl Row, and then you could crop Connor and I out of the picture with Jalen Hyatt as well.
Sure. Yeah. We
Yeah.
could do that. I'll be a Jalen Hyatt guy.
Yeah.
Love Jalen Hyatt.
You found one.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it for
Yeah.
us.
Okay.
Yeah. You.
Last show was a single man.
That's
last
right.
show is a single man.
My last,
anyway,
my last show of the season.
we never actually
wow.
talked about the Denver running backs. We'll see how it all plays out.
Yes, Audric Estime.
It's
told
Audric
you.
Estime. It's going to be Javonte Williams. Maybe Samaje Perine's doesn't make this team.
So we
They
didn't
do
talk
like
about it for a reason.
McLaughlin.
There was a reason we didn't talk about it. It's the alien versus predator thing. Whoever wins, we lose. It doesn't matter.
Fair enough.
Javonte Williams is going to be
Fair
the guy
enough.
again.
So you're
gotta get out of here.
tonight's your last night as a single man.
That's right.
What are you going to do?
we kept
hitting
saying
the
he's
town.
single.
You're
He's
hitting
not
the
really
town?
Yeah,
single.
taking the Metro North right to New York City.
Yeah.
No,
you, Trevor. Well, you know
is
what,
good
Jay?
sleep.
If you and I were really good blokes,
Yes.
we would figure out a way between now and tomorrow at 5. When does it start? I should know this.
I believe 7 o'clock.
7
you should be
o'clock.
there
I
by.
should. All right. I'll make sure I'm there before
Yeah.
7.
Now, if you want to come to the ceremony,
Oh, when's the 7? Yeah. When's the?
yeah, 6:30.
6:30. The ceremony. Ooh, and the party starts. So short ceremony. All right. There we
No,
go.
we
All
can't
right.
figure out
Yeah,
results.
it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Anyway, what were we saying? Because we're barely men, let alone good blokes.
Good blokes
I
is a hell of
know,
a
but
phrase.
if we were good blokes, we would somehow figure out a way between now and 6:30 tomorrow to get Audric Estime to
Yes.
his wedding.
That would be an all-time
I
move.
feel like he's available.
What's an appearance fee for Audric Estime?
Low.
Exactly.
Yeah, low.
Here's a 6-pack of Bud Light.
Yeah.
And
Come on, Audric.
yeah,
Notre Dame guy, NBC might have a contact.
there you go.
Something to think
let's
about.
get Audric Estime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least we'll get a cameo from him or something.
Oh, that's what we
doable.
should do.
That's actually doable.
That's actually doable.
Yeah. You can pull some strings.
Yeah.
I'll see
No,
what
We'll
I'll
pony
watch.
up the extra money for the
You pull some
24-hour.
strings.
We'll pony up the extra.
I'll put it on the registry. A cameo from Audric Estime.
Done.
There you go. Okay.
Done.
Finally, I got something else besides the fire pit.
Fantastic. There we
Tyrone
go.
toaster.
All right. Well, listen. If ever there was a time to just do whatever it is you want tonight, because Chris is not going to get. She's marrying you tomorrow.
Yes.
Like
We
so,
are.
like, you kind of have a free pass tonight because she's not going to be like she's not calling off the wedding or anything like that.
I probably have to go to the rehearsal dinner, though.
Yeah. Oh, there's that.
Yep.
There is
That's
that.
the
We're not
problem.
supposed to go to that, right?
No.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I don't think we were invited.
Yeah, I was going to say, 'cause I'm not.
There you go. Hey, that music means it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Also, don't crash Connor's wedding. But if you do, you get to sit next to Jay. For Croucher and Freeman Connor Rogers and his new wife Kristen tomorrow, I'm Matthew. We'll see you tomorrow, or next week, I should say. Peace out.
Tomorrow.
I don't know. I'm drunk. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.